Some people look perfectly normal on the outside, but carry a darkness so heavy it seeps into every room they enter. A darkness that drains your peace, suffocates your joy, and quietly poisons the connections you hold most dear. This is not just about toxic people. No, this is deeper, much darker. What we are talking about are human vessels, walking, breathing, yet influenced, used, or even guided by destructive spiritual forces whose mission is to dismantle everything pure inside you. They wear smiles that seem harmless, voices that sound kind, sometimes even speaking in the language of faith. But behind it all is an agenda. And if you've ever walked away from someone feeling unusually heavy, mentally foggy, emotionally empty, as if your spirit itself had been drained, you may have already crossed paths with one of them. In the next moments, I will reveal 5 undeniable signs that you are dealing with a demon in human form, and the exact spiritual strategies to shield yourself before it's too late. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could very well save your calling, your peace, and your destiny. And before we dive in, if this message stirs something inside you, give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and comment 99 below, because Matthew 18:12 reminds us that the shepherd will leave the 99 to go after the one. And if you are here right now, heaven has already come looking for you. Sign 1. You feel drained in their presence. It begins so quietly, you almost convince yourself it's nothing. You wake up with a clear mind, a steady heart, and a lightness in your spirit. You might even hum a song to yourself, sip your coffee with gratitude, or feel that unshakable connection to God's peace. But then, you spend a few minutes in their presence, and it's as if the atmosphere around you changes. Your chest feels heavier, your breathing shifts, and without realizing it, you've gone from feeling alive to feeling like the very air has been sucked out of the room. They don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to insult you directly. In fact, some of them are masters of keeping their tone warm, their smile gentle, their eyes locked onto yours. Yet beneath it all, something is being extracted from you. Every word they speak, every subtle facial expression, every carefully timed pause is pulling from the reserves of your soul. You leave the interaction feeling like your strength has been stolen, and you can't even explain how. This is not normal tiredness. This is not just being socially drained. No, this is spiritual theft. They are feeding, not on your body, but on your light. These people are spiritual vampires, and their hunger is not satisfied by food or drink. It's satisfied by your hope, your joy, your calm, your clarity. And the way they operate is insidious. They don't come at you like a roaring storm. They move like a slow leak in your spirit. At first, you think you're fine. But by the time you realize what's happening, the damage is already done. That deep enthusiasm you had for your day, it's gone. The creative idea you were excited about, it feels pointless now. That confidence in your steps, it's been replaced by uncertainty. They know how to disguise this draining process so well that you may even feel guilty for suspecting them. You'll think, they didn't say anything wrong. Maybe it's just me. But make no mistake, your spirit is picking up what your mind can't yet fully articulate. This is why spiritual discernment is so vital. You are not imagining it. You are feeling the invisible exchange taking place. Sometimes it happens through subtle undermining, slight comments about your capabilities, small reminders of your failures, or quiet comparisons to someone better. Sometimes it's through an almost obsessive focus on their own struggles, forcing you into the role of emotional caretaker while they give nothing in return. And other times, it's through a presence that feels like a shadow. No matter how much light you bring, it seems to dim the moment they step into the room. If you don't catch this early, the consequences are devastating. You stop dreaming big, not because you lost faith, but because you don't have the energy to imagine anymore. You stop stepping forward, not because you don't want to, but because you feel too heavy to move. You stop listening for God's voice, not because you turned away from Him, but because all the noise and weight they've left in your spirit makes it hard to hear. And here's the chilling part. They rarely take all at once. They take little by little, visit after visit, conversation after conversation, until one day you wake up and realize you've been running on fumes for months, maybe years. But let this be your awakening. If you notice this pattern, if someone's presence consistently leaves you emptier than when you arrived, do not dismiss it. Your spirit is your most valuable treasure, and God never called you to hand it over to those who are draining you for their own survival. Remember, light is never meant to dim permanently. If you feel it fading every time you're around a certain person, it's not by accident. Protect that flame, because the enemy will send those who don't just hate your light. They need it to keep their own darkness alive. And here's the question you must ask yourself right now. If you walked away from them for a month, would your joy return? If the answer is yes, then maybe you already know what you need to do, because this was only the first sign, and the next one will make you realize just how deep their influence truly runs. Sign 2, they make you doubt your own mind. They move in a way that is almost surgical, precise, intentional. You don't notice the first cut because it's so small. Maybe it starts with a single offhand comment, something that makes you blink and think, wait, what did they just say? You feel a sting. But before you can even respond, they've already smiled, changed the subject, or laughed it off as a joke. You tell yourself, maybe I'm overreacting. And that, right there, is exactly where the trap begins. These people twist reality like it's an art form. They'll say something cruel one moment, and in the very next breath, deny it ever left their lips. You'll confront them with something you know you heard, and they'll tilt their head, look you in the eye, and say, I never said that. You must be remembering it wrong. At first, you resist. You think, no, I'm certain I heard it. But then they double down, calmly, confidently, with that dangerous certainty that makes you pause. They accuse you of being too sensitive, dramatic, or imagining things. And with each denial, each accusation, each subtle twist of the truth, they are rewriting the story inside your mind. This isn't carelessness. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is strategy. The goal is simple but deadly, to make you question your memory, your judgment, and eventually, your sanity. Because once you stop trusting your own thoughts, you'll start relying on theirs. And that is exactly where they want you, dependent on them for the truth, even when their truth is a carefully constructed lie. Think about it. If they can make you doubt what you just experienced, what's stopping them from controlling how you interpret everything? A look, a word, an event. They will filter it for you until their voice becomes the lens through which you see the world. Even worse, it becomes the voice through which you hear God. You see, when you're caught in this cycle long enough, you start second-guessing even the convictions the Holy Spirit has placed in you. That quiet nudge from God that once felt clear now feels like a hazy echo, because they've trained you to believe that if they don't validate it, it can't be trusted. And the way they do this is masterful. They'll bring up events from the past, but only half the story, the half that makes you look like the problem. They'll forget the details that would clear your name. They'll twist timelines, flip conversations upside down, and even project their own faults onto you so convincingly that you start apologizing for things they did. It's psychological warfare dressed as casual conversation. Over time, you begin to notice the physical effects. Anxiety before you see them, a knot in your stomach when you talk, sleepless nights replaying conversations in your head, trying to figure out if maybe, just maybe, you really are the one losing it. And here's the truth they don't want you to know. This is not an accident. This is not random. This is the serpent's oldest tactic. Confuse the mind so you can corrupt the soul. If they can make you unsure of what's real, they can steer you away from the actual truth, and therefore away from the God who is truth. But deep down, there's still that flicker inside you, that tiny, stubborn light that refuses to be snuffed out. That's your spiritual compass trying to break through the fog. You might not be able to put your finger on why things feel wrong, but you know they do, and that knowing is sacred. Never ignore it. Because the moment you start to reclaim your trust in your own discernment, the spell begins to crack. That's when you'll see their panic. That's when you'll hear the venom beneath the concern. And that's when you'll realize that the voice you've been hearing all this time was never meant to be the loudest in your head. The loudest voice should always be the one that spoke creation into existence, the one that called you by name before the foundation of the world. And here's the dangerous twist. You might think this is the worst of it, but what comes next isn't just about controlling your perception. It's about killing the very dreams God planted in your soul. And that is where their attack gets even darker. Sign 3. They quietly sabotage your dreams. It never begins with an open insult. No, that would be too obvious. Too easy for you to recognize and reject. The sabotage comes in whispers, carefully measured, disguised as care, wrapped in the kind of tone that makes you question if you should even feel offended. You share your vision, your God-given calling, maybe something fresh that's burning in your spirit, and their response seems gentle. Are you sure that's for you? Or, I just don't want you to get hurt. On the surface, it's concern, but beneath that surface, it's poison. They won't come at your dream head-on, because that might awaken your defense. Instead, they plant tiny seeds of doubt in the soil of your mind, knowing they will grow if you let them sit there long enough. A little, what if it fails? Here. A subtle, do you really think you can do that? There. And before you know it, you're watering their doubt instead of your faith. Why do they do it? Because your growth exposes their stagnation. Your courage calls out their fear. Your willingness to chase what God placed in your heart is a mirror they cannot bear to look into, because it reflects the dreams they abandoned, the callings they ignored, the visions they buried. So instead of celebrating you, they make your mountain look higher, your path look longer, your chances look smaller. They use words that feel like they're protecting you, when in reality they're protecting themselves from the discomfort of watching someone else do what they never dared. This is not just about jealousy. It's spiritual opposition in disguise. Dreams from God are dangerous to the enemy because they are seeds of kingdom change. And if the enemy can't kill the seed outright, he'll send someone to quietly poison the soil. You'll notice the pattern if you look closely. You tell them you've been praying about starting something new, and suddenly, they're listing every reason it might be bad timing. You mention an opportunity God opened, and they remind you of someone who failed trying something similar. You share a vision that makes your spirit burn, and they cool it with, maybe you should wait until things settle down. At first, you might think they're being wise or practical, but wisdom from God encourages and strengthens, never paralyzes. If their words leave you more afraid than inspired, more hesitant than hopeful, then what they're speaking is not divine wisdom, it's fear disguised as advice. The most dangerous part? Over time, you start repeating their words in your own head. Their doubts become your doubts. Their limitations become your limitations. And slowly, the volume of God's whisper inside you gets drowned out by the echo of their fear. I've seen it happen again and again. People on the edge of breakthrough stop climbing because someone they trusted made the summit look impossible. They trade their destiny for comfort. They silence their calling to keep someone else from feeling insecure. But here's the truth. Every great move of God in Scripture was met with opposition. Not just from enemies, but from people close enough to speak into the dreamer's ear. Joseph's brothers laughed at his dreams. Nehemiah was mocked for rebuilding the wall. Even Jesus was doubted in his own hometown. So if you feel that subtle push to shrink back, if the fire in your chest starts flickering after certain conversations, pay attention. That's not random. That's not just life. That is targeted sabotage. And you have a choice. Feed the voice of doubt or feed the voice of God. Because the enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can convince you to destroy your own dream. Ask yourself right now, how many ideas, visions, or plans have you quietly buried because someone's disguised concern made you believe it wasn't worth trying? Because what comes next in their tactics is even more ruthless. It's no longer about slowing your progress. It's about flooding your life with so much chaos that you can't even see the path anymore. Sign 4. They thrive on chaos and confusion. There is a certain kind of person who cannot survive in stillness. To them, peace is not comfort, it's starvation. They need chaos like lungs need air because chaos is the environment where their influence thrives. Wherever they go, calm doesn't last, serenity doesn't survive. The moment the atmosphere starts to settle, they will find a way, any way, to disrupt it. It begins with subtle sparks, a whispered comment between two friends, a twisted retelling of something you said, a raised eyebrow at just the right moment to plant suspicion. And before you even understand what's happening, the room that was filled with laughter is suddenly thick with tension. They know exactly how to ignite these emotional fires, and once the flames catch, they step back, letting the smoke blind everyone else. They'll position themselves as a bystander, a neutral observer, the voice of reason in the chaos they started. It's a masterful manipulation tactic. Create the storm, then pretend to be the only shelter. And here's the terrifying truth. If peace lingers too long, it's dangerous for them. Clarity exposes them. Stillness gives you space to think, to reflect, to see their patterns for what they are. So they disrupt it. They will invent a crisis out of thin air, pulling in old grievances, manufacturing offense, or making accusations with no foundation, just to keep you off balance. Why? Because when you're confused, you're easier to control. When your emotions are constantly on edge, you don't have the energy to question their motives. When you're in constant reaction mode, you don't have the clarity to hear from God about what's really going on. They use chaos as camouflage. In the whirlwind they create, it's harder to see who is pulling the strings. And if you dare to point out the obvious, that they seem to be at the center of every storm, you become the problem. Suddenly you're too sensitive, paranoid, or holding grudges. The worst part is that this chaos doesn't just exhaust you. It begins to reshape you. Constant conflict rewires your nervous system. You live braced for impact, expecting the next explosion, never fully relaxing, even in moments of quiet. Your spirit stays tense, your body stays alert, and over time, you start to believe this is normal. But it's not normal. It's not healthy. And it's certainly not God's design. Scripture tells us that God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. 1 Corinthians 14:33. So if confusion reigns wherever they go, you have your answer about which spirit is operating through them. These people count on one thing, that you will grow so accustomed to the chaos that you stop resisting it, that you'll become too tired to fight for peace. But here's what they don't expect, that you will begin to recognize the pattern, step out of the whirlwind, and stand in clarity long enough to see the truth. And when you do, something shifts. The fog begins to lift. The noise begins to fade. And you realize, without chaos, they lose their power. Without confusion, their voice is just one among many, and not the loudest. But don't think for a moment that they will let go easily. The next tactic they deploy is far more personal. It's not just about disrupting the atmosphere around you. It's about dismantling the very relationships that keep you strong. And when they move to isolate you, the danger escalates to a level you cannot afford to ignore. Sign 5. They isolate you from your support. Of all the tactics they use, this one is the most calculated and the most dangerous. It doesn't explode overnight. It creeps in quietly, almost invisibly, until you don't even realize how far you've drifted from the people who once held you up. They start small, just little drops of suspicion in your mind. Do you really think your friend has your best interest at heart? Or I don't know. Something about your pastor feels off to me. They'll say it in a tone that sounds concerned, protective, even loving. But that tone is the sugar coating that makes the poison easier to swallow. Soon, they'll make you question the motives of the people who genuinely love you. They'll remind you of your friends' mistakes, but conveniently forget their own. They'll replay your family's flaws like a broken record, but never address the cracks in their own character. And when you share something personal with them, they'll twist it into a story that paints others as unreliable or unsafe, conditioning you to believe they are the only one you can trust. It's a slow dismantling of your support system, one relationship at a time. A friend you don't call as often, a mentor you stop meeting with, a family member you start avoiding, and every step away from those connections pulls you deeper into their orbit. They want to be the only voice you hear, the only perspective you trust, the only counsel you seek. Because once they have that, they don't just influence your choices, they control them. And the terrifying truth: this isn't just toxic behavior. This is a spiritual attack crafted with one purpose: to separate you from the people God placed in your life for your protection, guidance, and encouragement. Isolation is one of the enemy's oldest strategies. Just as a predator drives a single sheep away from the flock before attacking, these individuals work to remove you from the herd of healthy, God-centered relationships that keep you safe. Alone, your discernment weakens. Alone, your hope feels heavier to carry. Alone, you become easier to manipulate, because there's no one left to challenge their lies. And here's what makes it even more sinister. They will position themselves as the hero in your isolation. They'll say, "I'm the only one who truly understands you." They'll remind you, "I've been here when no one else was." And because they've already eroded your trust in everyone else, you believe it. You stop sharing your victories with the friends who would cheer for you. You stop asking for prayer from those who would cover you in intercession. You stop laughing with the people who make you feel alive. And in that silence, in that shrinking world, their influence grows. But there is something they don't want you to realize. Isolation is not God's design for your life. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, "Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves." A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. The enemy knows this, which is why he sends people to cut every strand, until the only cord left is the one tying you to your oppressor. The longer you stay cut off from your support, the harder it becomes to see the manipulation for what it is. Your sense of reality bends toward theirs. Your thoughts echo with their voice, not God's. And in that place, they can rewrite your identity, your purpose, and even your faith. But here's the thing. They can only keep you in that prison if you choose to stay silent. The moment you reach out, one message, one call, one prayer, you start to tear down the walls they've built. And once those walls crack, their hold begins to break. Still, you need to know this. When you pull away, they will fight harder than ever to keep you close. They'll use guilt. They'll use shame. They'll twist the past. They'll try to convince you that leaving them means betraying the only person who stood by you. And yet, the truth is clearer than ever. If they were really for you, they would push you toward your support system, not pull you away from it. The moment you see this, you stand at a crossroads. And what you choose next will determine whether you remain in their shadow or step fully back into the light. Because after this sign, there's only one thing left to talk about: the way to break free completely, reclaim your strength, and shut every door the enemy has tried to open in your life. And that's where everything changes. Listen to me closely. This is the moment everything shifts. You've seen the signs. You've felt the pull. And now, you decide whether you keep walking in their shadow or step into the authority God already placed in you. Trust your spirit, not just your eyes. The enemy can disguise himself in charm, in kindness, even in the language of faith. But your spirit knows the truth. If something feels wrong, it's because your spirit is sounding the alarm. Stop silencing it. Stop explaining it away. Set boundaries that cannot be moved, and once they are set, guard them like the walls of a fortress. Yes, they will push back. Yes, they will call you cold, ungrateful, or selfish. But every insult is proof that the boundary was necessary. Stand your ground. And if the time comes when you must cut ties, cut them without apology. You are not under a divine obligation to remain in covenant with someone sent to destroy your calling. Scripture doesn't say to reform them, it says to avoid them. Protect your purpose with the same intensity you'd protect your own heartbeat. Stay close to the light. Make the presence of God your dwelling place, not your weekend visit. Surround yourself with people who don't drain you, but fill you. People who pray for you in your absence, who speak life when you can't find the words, who remind you of your identity when the world tries to strip it away. And above all, reconnect to God's voice every single day. That voice is your compass. That voice is your shield. That voice will take every wound, every lie, every stolen dream, and turn them into weapons of testimony. His truth will restore your strength, heal the deepest places of your heart, and call you by the name He gave you before time began. You were not created to live in chains. You were created to reign with Christ. You are not prey. You are a warrior. You are not voiceless. You carry the sound of heaven. And you are not powerless. The authority of the kingdom is in your hands. So walk away from manipulation. Tear down every altar built to your silence. Step into freedom like it's your birthright, because it is. And never forget, the enemy's greatest fear is not your pain, not your struggle, not even your resistance. His greatest fear is a child of God who knows their authority. Type, "I am untouchable" in the comments if you're taking your power back today. Because when heaven sees you declare it, all of hell will know. They should have never come for you.